Hello, everybody. Hi. And a little disclaimer that for one of the first time, if you maybe recognize the goes to 11, this one, maybe somebody have seen an older version of this talk, and so I'm not starting with something entirely new, but I reopened the box and re-drill into the problem. And of course, I thought it was like, yeah, just a little bit of change, and I ended up rewriting the entire stuff. So yeah, that's more or less what it might be. Still, we are talking about problems that were part of our previous talks with a different perspective. So it might be a little deja vu. I hope this is not scaring you away. We start with something which is not exactly part of it, which is the story of an account that wasn't an account. And the context was we were trying to develop a portion of a treasury system in our internal software, and it was kind of an easy thing. We would like to just keep track of how much money is available on different bank accounts or different digital accounts like PayPal and so on. Usual stuff. I think that happened was interesting. The fact that it was really clear that we need an account. And then the moment we said we need something called an account, it came with the two methods, withdraw and deposit. And that was clearly the beginning of a rabbit hole that was leading us nowhere. And so we recovered quite quickly. But the thing that was interesting for us that we have to look at what might be the different possible alternatives, the trap that we could go for. So the first one was well, maybe we go for the account with these two operations, and clearly was not our choice because that was the model of the account inside the bank, but we were not the bank. So, well, that was a dumb idea. Still, it was the first thing that popped up in our brain. Second possibility is just we have an account. We know that we have a different type of operation because we don't need to have an account. We just need to track what is going on in the account, and also doing this on a not so frequently basis. We didn't want to invest on integration because every single integration channel was expensive. So this was basically notes on an account. I'm checking how much it is today. I'm writing the number, and that's okay. And so we only needed, as an extra information, the last updated on. Still, didn't feel that right because this is not what you do in an account. The third thing was, let's call it an account tracker. This is more explicit with the name. It's just saying this is what you do. This is just an object which is basically a proxy of something else. This is what you know about what is inside the bank. A little bit more honest. Still, that is not a domain name. So it looks like there was not a single solution that was okay. And also the name account tracker was the result of many discussions, and yeah. So we ended up with this kind of choice. We exposed more or less the behavior of register a snapshot and track an operation. We called it an account, which was consistent with the user expectation, and we called it an account tracker behind because that was coherent with the semantic. And we felt guilty about it because, are we kind of killing the ubiquitous language? We are talking with the domain experts, and we had some extra possibility because it was all internal, so we could switch roles, but yeah, that was our initial feeling of, are we doing the right thing here? And one of the things that we discovered, a little lesson, is just labels can make you happy. If you just call the things on the surface the way that people want, you can do quite a lot of things behind. And that was working quite well as a design. The second part of this area was, but why? Why did we go, even for a short time, into the danger zone? Why was it so tempting? And this was interesting for us because it was something like connecting with the pattern, realizing that, oh, it's an account, so it needs to have these operations. It took us a little bit more extra time and a longer discussion to remove this. So I'm once again, after many years, getting back to thinking fast and slow from Daniel Kahneman. There was a sort of bypass. There was an idea that was a wrong one, but it was quick. Oh, of course, we need to have this and this. Tricky bastard, our brain. And so let me make it more explicit. There's a little backdoor in our brain that allows sneaky things to get in. And one of the things that these little things have in common is the fact that many of them were examples we played with when we started learning our software architecture practices. We gave a little bit extra trust to something that came from our educators in some way. And also, and so this is a warning, don't trust what I'm gonna say, also from examples that you get from people on the stage. I'm not gonna quote Oasis, but there's a reference also in there. Another perspective, let's change now. Talking about the dictionary now, in the project glossary or something like this. It was a little stupid thing that happened to me a few weeks ago. And we've been working on a long-term project with a big customer, and we ended up finally having a migration to a new platform. So we took a look at the old pages of the wiki, and the glossary, something that you're very, very invested in the first days of a project, was one of them. And so this is a complex, long-lasting project, more or less 3 years, complex domain, very specific jargons. They have very, very weird terms for this. And many things were in the still describing special cases in this scenario. But the thing that was the biggest revelation, something that I was not expecting, was actually this little stupid thing. I was reading the whole dictionary, and I was one of the contributors of this one, so I trusted it. And every single term coming from marketing after 3 years was an entire crap. Not a single term was meaningful anymore, not a single sentence. This is going to be our direction, this and this and this. Everything that we noted and wrote in the dictionary, following, trying to learn, turns out to be complete bullshit. Yeah. So there's something that is weird in, or maybe rooted in our approach, or is dangerous, which is we want to learn the domain language, and we might be learning some of it from the wrong person. We are putting our trust not exactly always in the right people. So, or maybe not in the right conversation. Some of the conversations are incredibly useful, some of them are not. Put in another way, not every information from the expert is suitable to become part of our model. But the way this conversation is happening is many times telling us, no, this is this is that, without any possible ambiguity. It's a different type of conversation, not driven, maybe not in the right way. Another little variation in this area, something that was a long-lasting problem for me, had to do with something like room reservation. Some are assigned at purchase time, so you want exactly that specific room, it can be reserved, but other things might happen, like you might get the room you want the moment you get to the hotel, or the moment you arrive, or in this case, it's ships, so that's a different scenario. There's a late binding with the rooms. And of course, you're not selling the room by themselves. There's also a lot of extra services, and this is creating a lot of exceptions, special packages, and so on, plus upgrades and so on. The thing that was bugging us in this scenario was we collected the sentences we were registering, taking notes and looking back. And once again, there was a clean solution that was working on the labels, have something which was all inclusive or similar stuff that was not part of the domain, but was just a label over a more technical idea of a bundle that could include something else. The thing, I mean, this design is nothing so special. The hard thing was every single conversation was leading us in the wrong direction. It was getting worse over the years because some of the experts changed and the new expert started to reteaching us the story, even if we already knew that the story was going in the other direction. Another idea that we could, we thought about it was maybe we're not straightly selling our inventory. It's not like most of the time we are selling the primary item, and in some cases we're selling ancillary services. But it might have been like we always selling a bundle. Sometimes this bundle is simple. It's just one of the typical choices that you can do in design. Instead of taking the normal case in the exception, well, make the exception the rule. And then if you can make a good user experience and nobody notices, well, maybe that's the idea. The other thing that we discovered at the end is the flat dictionary can be a force in the wrong direction. If you start creating a glossary at the beginning of the project, looks like you would like to accommodate all the terms in a place where everybody can understand, but then you don't have the necessary flexibility to actually turn your dictionary into a context-driven one or making a more sophisticated map. Because somebody wants just a dictionary, and then you do it for everybody's benefit, and then maybe you're creating a space where some words are not exactly right. So let me put the question in another way. How many of you are using a glossary for the project? Raise your hands, please. And this is already less than half. How many of you have a context-driven dictionary in your project? Oh, you're very little. How many of you are exposing the contradiction of the domain expert jargon inside the dictionary? 2. Okay. Well, this is giving some numbers. So the official way of describing things is still mostly oral, somebody verbal, somebody is going to check on the dictionary, and the dictionary might be a force reinforcing all the information. Even more, that was the most annoying thing. When there was a generational change with expert, new people were hired, the newcomers were learning the domain complexity from the legacy software that we wanted to refactor. And they started explaining us, no, it works like this. And we basically wanted to die. And because we had to restart this scares me to death. I don't know how much is readable. We didn't want to restart all the political fight for changing it. Okay, this is the frustration base. Let me change the scenario and get out of places where every change requires a negotiation to the beauty of writing software in a small scale. And so I'm going to be talking about something that we could do and we did in our company, where we have the luxury of not having to negotiate because, well, we are also the business, so we do whatever we want. So one of the first things that we had to play with is the fact that a bounded context is a unit of applicability of a model or language consistency, a single model. We like the definition, it's good, but it's not exactly actionable because terms are working really well. When you have a good bounded context, then you find like, oh, it fits the definition. But if you're looking for it, you need something different. In a large organization, you will use proxies. You will use something like maybe subdomains, maybe the limits of the legacy software, maybe the team structure, maybe the organization, the technology. All of this is giving you clues to determine the bounded context. In a small organization, you don't have it. You have a small team, you have no existing organizational boundaries. If the organization is really small and our is small, well, everything else is pulling you towards the monolith. You have nowhere else to look to, and the natural forces to model is you're gonna make a monolith. And the only thing we can look at is purpose, and in our case, different business lines. So this is what I found out by looking mud architecture on internet. So you can actually even do something that have some kind of beauty with mud, but that was not our goal. I mean, I cannot just pretend to be a domain-driven design expert and then build a mud monolith in my house. So I don't want to do this. The goal was exactly to get out, and we wanted to counter the forces that were leading us in this direction. And the forces are, usually, if you start small, you might have a single database, and this database implicitly have a flat namespace, and if you follow the flat namespace, you end up being in a glued monolith. We didn't want to go database. We went even sourcing instead and use mostly separate projections just to avoid this, to have a little bit more freedom to play. But still, we were working on a monolithic project at the code level. And then well, it looks like your code completion is just not your best friend if you have polysemic words. If you have words which are used with a slightly different meaning in different bounded contexts, then they are not going to like it. And then they are basically forcing you to start using different words to separate it. But at the same time, your brain is working exactly in the same way. So it's just you're thinking still in a flat namespace, especially if you're thinking about multiple problems in the same day. So we wanted to do something about it. Basically, our attitude was, no, we don't want to have anything that will look like a monolith here. We will try everything. And we were designing our internal software with the idea of growing in the right way. I need to prove myself, and maybe also somebody else, that we could make the software grow without the need of calling some external consultant to find us the boundary to finally refactor the monolith. I don't want to refactor it, I want to do it right. Okay, so we started looking for the possible bounded context in our scenario, and some of them were the obvious things, like where we're offering trainings and workshop, but also consulting. We have a planning problem, marketing, building, sales, logistics. And it started to look like this. Like, well, training is not exactly the same thing, because we have a little bit of planning inside the training organization and planning also inside the consulting. We have billing for both of them. So this idea was not working that well. The second part of this purpose was trying to separate the bounded context in a very lightweight way. So not going into microservices or anything like this, that would be suicidal. But to try to have a strong logical separation, basically on this premise, like mixing is cheaper than splitting. So if we start with the very dotted line separation and we make a mistake, we can still put the two things together without much hassle, while if we mix too much and we need to split later, we know that this cost is higher. This is typical asymmetry of wrong boundaries. Or put it another way, we were trying to get very good dog food. That was our approach. So given the apple and oranges separation, we said, like, no, we need something more sophisticated. So we started highlighting what were the business lines first and used this as our first splitter, discriminator between the different areas. It's something which is really obvious if you're working with large companies, because you don't get to work at 2 or 3 business lines at the same time. But if you are a small company, this is something that you need to highlight because the story might be different. The second discriminator was something that was coming from our experience, that was maybe visualizing the phases. Not every single business line had the same phases, and the phases was something that was a little bit of a magic trick. So I feel actually guilty about it. Like, where are the phases coming from? And well, they come from 10 years of putting orange stickies on paper roll and seeing many different companies more or less replicating some organization patterns. It comes from looking for independent purposes inside the organization, maybe some standard departments. Every organization has some body responsible for billing and accounting. And or sometimes also gut feeling. A planning problem is different from a procurement problem, and so on. But don't look at it as a template. It's not about perfection. It's about having some structure to refer to. On top of this grid, we started playing, okay, inside of this area, we have models that are solving some specific problem. This is getting a little bit more interesting. One, you're starting to see how many are they, all of this different stuff. The more mature businesses, like public and private training, they have a little bit more bubbles with specific purposes, and not every bubble is effective as affecting every business line. So public trainings, consulting, public speaking, software delivery, sponsorships, and meetups, events, and also books and stuff like this. They have different flows. They are combined in different way. Something which is important for one business line is not relevant for others. But also something which is relevant for many, like the last models, like global analysis, billing. I mean, you don't do billing if you don't have revenues, like in sponsorship and meetups, but you will still need to have some bookkeeping, financial analysis, and maybe forecast for the thing. Okay, we just needed to see them so that we know what we're talking about, we more or less know how many they are, and we can control our complexity. Just the fact that we are small doesn't mean that we have to be messy. I don't know if this looks tidy to you, but it looks tidy to me. And so the thing that we discovered this way, just like, well, the shapes and distribution method, we discovered that we had gaps in some places. There's one place that was interesting, like, yeah, I clearly don't have a strategy for public speaking. You know, that's one of the little holes that I discovered while preparing this. But you could see the areas which are more common to the others. You can have more precise names and purposes because you're referring in a smaller space. You're not contaminating what is only specific to a business line. And it's weird because our company is still small. We're doing many things, but this separation was really good. Also, it worked pretty well in the IDE. Still, the other part of the message is you cannot keep this structure in your head. You need a visible map. You need something physical, touchable, colorful in order to deliver this message. If you zoom on a single business line, well, it starts to look like an EventStorming or a value creation. You have many multiple models collaborating, and that's how I got more or less the phases. It's not exactly the same thing. It's not squared, but yeah, that was the idea. Then on top of it, of course, we started modeling our flows with the idea of, okay, no trade-off. We try to do the good thing. And the first pattern that we started to play with is this old friend. The initial name was collaborative construction. Now I call it the 3 archetype or draft executable and tracking. The thing is, you have usually 3 models with very different behavior, very similar languages because you want to plan or sketch or design exactly the thing that you want to execute and exactly the thing that you want to track later on. Only in our scenario, it started to look a little bit more complicated than this. So we designed something, starting from public training, classical example, so that no NDA problem, and we separated on the different axes. So, okay, we are gonna be doing the planning, and we're gonna have the semantics of setting a date, canceling and confirming. We're gonna have sales, so we're tracking the purchases, and ticket sale is a container of ticket. Still not exactly happy about this name. And we have another bubble for the inventory, how many people can actually register to a given class, plus a bubble or bounded context for logistics. In the tracking part, we have what we call the training summary, which is grabbing information from all the bubbles. So there's a little bit more semantic in the schedule, confirm, and cancel, open sales, purchase ticket, close sales, and open registration with the capacity, register attendee, cancel attendee, and close the registration. It looks like many moving parts, and there are many moving parts. We have policies to coordinate this area. The moment we decide to schedule a public training event, we basically work on the planning, fixing the date, and we open, maybe immediately, maybe we leave the possibility of opening the training later on for the ticket sale. We open the registration, and then we have a few other policies connected so that when the purchase is completed, you actually have a ticket, and when the ticket is purchased, you have the registration. So there's something that looks like a very, very long flow. I compressed it in here. There was no way to make it readable with an end-to-end, more horizontal timeline. But you see the moving part, and you see that the policies are the glue between the action, and sometimes there might be a little bit of hierarchy in the policies connecting them. The other part of the flow is we have this training summary collecting information from all the areas into something which is really, really big. Is it all good in this process? Looks like a big contraption to make something relatively simple. Something is clearly not good, or at least not beautiful. The horrible names. I mean, public event and open event, I still cannot distinguish them. And I decided to go on open if it's something that could be joined by people, if public, if it's something that you can announce and so on. But I'm not really sure about the naming, and the fact that I'm both the domain expert and the architect, it's putting me in a dangerous situation. So do I like this stuff? No. I also don't like the cancel attendee, because we have the forces for registering an attendee and then canceling the registration of the attendee. And I'm looking for a symmetry, and I'm never going to be happy about this part. So that's actually ugly. There's another problem in here, which is we are basically talking about capacity in two places. There's one ticket capacity, and there is one seat or places or spots capacity in the event. And it looks like unnecessary machinery. So when you look about it, the first objection is Yagni, clearly. That's too much complexity. Why are you doing this? Well, it's my prototype. I'm prototyping. I would like to see how it ends. So yeah, well, maybe you're right. I don't want to see. It's too early to say. Basically, just a single use case is not enough. I just made something work, and then I need to challenge it with a few other use cases and see if this scaffolding makes sense. It turns out it does in a few other scenarios. Like if you go private trainings instead, we don't need tickets, but we're still registering. So you might have a capacity for a private event, maximum 20 people. The people might be coming from the internal company, but we don't have to go through a ticketing platform just to have the registration. It just doesn't make any sense. That's a separate problem. And if you want to play private trainings on top of it, we just have a very little change. Like we need another coordinator, and we need something to play with the deal, because it's not the training is not confirmed when selling enough tickets, but after behind the door negotiation. Let's play another variation. If we go online training instead, the delivery phase was something, one of the biggest stressor for us was that when the pandemic arrived, and so we need to move. And what did we have to change was, well, the logistic, anything that we have to do with the venue doesn't matter anymore, but there's something new that we have to do for the delivery, maybe preparing the tool, opening Zoom calls and events and so on. And the good thing of this approach so far is just like every little change and variation was not forcing us to open any box. The boxes were working as usual. We were switching off some boxes and creating a few ones. So not a single extra test inside something that was already working. just recombining things. And then yesterday, I was watching Cyril and Barry's talk, and I realized I was working on my prototype, stressing it with a lot of what-if scenario, and am I doing this without knowing? Or then I was talking with Eric Evans, he said or maybe it's just like we're pulling, because yes, that's exactly what Eric taught me many years ago. If you just put all the use cases really nearby, you're not exploring the solution space enough. You need some use cases which is very far away to shake your model and see if this is working. And I realized that while modeling, there's a few business-driven stressors which are not yet related to the probability of the business happening, but more related to playing with the building blocks. Can I have this without this? Can I have a train class without a ticket sale? Oh, yes, it's a private class. Okay, well, or maybe something that I don't need to sell. Can I have reservation without a ticket? Yes, not only private classes, but I can have reservation without a ticket if there is a friend or one of our employees that wants to join the class. Or the choice between, is this the exception of the rule? So many times the narrative of the expert is describing you the rosy scenario and then telling you about the exceptions. And I've seen many places, if you can find a coherent description of the exception and making it the rule, maybe the rosy scenario is just a lucky case. Okay, something that we can try. Is it guaranteed to work? Not exactly, but it's something that is worth exploring. And the other thing is, which sounds like blasphemy if you are a Yagni lover, is can I have this and this? Can I have a ticket inventory and a seat inventory? Why should I? And I would like to see what happens if I have it, because it might be one thing that could open possibilities, or if it doesn't, I just need to make sure that this prototyping exploration is cheap. And yes, the other thing that was interesting is the more options we were combining together, the more the cost of having those options was decreasing instead of growing. And they feel like, okay, this is a nice place to be. We're not in a monolith which is collapsing over its weight. We are in a structure which is getting flexible what it should be. And while exploring this, the reasoning started becoming more creative. But if we have this, then hybrid trainings could actually be a possibility. So something with 2 days in the class and 2 remote sessions plus a video, having combo tickets for more than one event. Oh yeah, so we have the ticket, which is allowing you the registration to 2 different events. Oh, that's easy. Composite events and so on. Resellers and partners, conferences and workshop, you can give a quota of tickets to partners and sell the main bulk to yourself. Or, since we have it as another business line, also, if you purchase a ticket for a training, well, it will receive a book as part of the courseware. The thing that was interesting, we were prototyping at the code level, and we started thinking about business options. That's exactly where I would like to be. Now, there are 2 things that were happening. It was the combination of forces from the top and which problems. And these forces are kind of different in this scenario. So these are the typical ones, like one, interacting with the domain expert with the problem of following them too much. They might be leading us in the wrong place. This detecting the business lies is probably harmful. I mean, you cannot make anything wrong by detecting business lines. The other thing that feels a little bit like a magician with a rabbit out of the hat is imposing phases and archetypes on the model, but was kind of going well. Still, it felt like magic tricks. The other forces were coming from coding practices, basically, just like detecting building blocks and types and making them safe, like, I would say tactical patterns, good old value objects, or value objects with more personality than just the basic types. I mean, it was not about having a money class, but it was having something more sophisticated. Let's have an example. It was the session layout class was at the beginning of this design journey, we started with something really simple, just like counting days. And int duration was all we needed. When pandemic arrived, it turns out like you cannot have sessions longer than 3 hours on Zoom, so days started not mapping very well with session. There was a new concept that needed to emerge. So we need a session container, and also maybe the empty space between the sessions started becoming interesting. So this is more or less the idea we started playing with. I mean, it's not sophisticated. It's very lo-fi, and it was working exactly because it's lo-fi. So we needed something which is a session layout. It was a container of things that happened on day 1, 2, and 3. It's a container of session. Well, maybe with a list, the session will have a type. Something is just like a call, others are exercises and workshop. And we also added the specific type of session duration because it was not a pure duration. It was 9:30 to 12:30, but without a specific day. So it was floating, and so we wanted a specific type of this. And the thing that was interesting is it led us to 2 parallel models, because on the design side, we wanted a structure that was not related to a date, and on the delivery side, we wanted to have a fixed date, and then the sessions were happening on a specific day, on a specific time, so that we could make also Google Calendar invitation, a Zoom call scheduling, and everything like this. That was more or less the area we were exploring. Absolutely not rocket science, just to show that we were having the building blocks, and those building blocks were giving us the confidence of saying like, oh, what about this? What about hybrid classes? What about long-lasting masters? Oh, it's just another session plan with a different duration between a different session. And are we doing this battle for the reuse against Yagni? Or, no, I wouldn't die for reuse. I mean, I stopped fighting for it probably 20 years ago. But I would probably fight for business composability, which is not, oh, somebody else is using my date converter class, but is I'm having building blocks which are making me manage a more interesting conversation with the business, and I'm providing options because options are just easy to combine with. But still, the problem of doing it internally was weird, because how much of this journey can involve real domain expert. I was lucky of being my own dog food gourmet designer, and there might be something not exactly easy or repeatable here. Still, there were other things that I was feeling guilty about. Horrible names. Remember the thing about flattening the space, because we are playing to 2 things. People will call it session plan, and we call it even the second one, session plan. The session plan versus session schedule is completely arbitrary, and I can even flip them in my brain every single day because I'm not a native speaker. So I needed to have 2 different names. I know the users would call them in the same way, so maybe we're going to play it with labels. Inside the IDE, we need a way not to mix them. But yes, those names are horrible and mostly arbitrary. So yeah, and this is kind of a repeatable scenario that happens whenever you're playing with this pattern. If you separate the draft model from the executable, you're having 2 independent models that could be optimized for their own purpose, but the names are going to be 90% the same. And this is something that I hate, but I accept it, unavoidable. In terms of visibility, I never mentioned that the meaning of this red line is, this is clear, an iceberg, and what you see and what you don't see. I mean, this is also the separation of responsibility and my attitude towards the domain expert. I'm really happy to have any conversation to detect what they need to use for their purposes on the visible part. But there's something under the hood, which is our responsibility, and we need to be free to develop according to design principle, semantics, coherence, and a lot of other stuff that many business experts don't care about. So if we let them guide also in the underwater part, we might not be in the right place. The other part of this story is this one, state as an illusion. And this is still part of this, what can we do with the domain expert and following them anywhere. So discussing about what managing the current state of public trainings, one common situation is we would like to see almost everything, but we would like to see the best summary. So how many tickets sold, what is the workshop, and what is the date, and so on. And most importantly, the state, this unconfirmed, is the most important information to give us our feedback. This is more or less a selection of what could finish inside the workshop summary. The thing which is interesting is this information are coming from all of the different boundary contexts, or maybe also the calendar and a few other things. We would like to see all of them together. The first illusion is, looks like, oh, this is a training summary, that's great. The training summary is just a read model, you don't have this data. But the thing about the state became interesting because the journey of following the expert was leading us into this thing. Like it's usually can start straight into unconfirmed if it starts published, or could be stealth if we can have the registration open, but we don't open a public page. Okay, and then it becomes confirmed. We keep registering people after the sales. It could be canceled for many reasons, like maybe we don't sell enough at the beginning, or maybe there's some problem with the trainer or with the venue, or maybe, yeah, once again, pandemic, and so many things can happen. If it's confirmed, then it will go into two different steps, like running, past, and end of the story. And the thing is, that's what you want to see. That's what the users needed to see. And the reason why they wanted to see things, it was at a very specific moment. The fact is, looked like a state machine, and it was not. So there were three, or our assumption is there is a more interesting model when we have 2 or 3 independent moving state machines under the hood, and what we see on the top is just a combination of them. So in terms of planning, the training could be unconfirmed, confirmed, and canceled. Time is a driver for future running a past, and when it comes to the registration, they can be open or closed, end of the story. Mixing them, it was a little bit more complicated and maybe a good way to the monolith. So this part of the discussion was, oh, I can show you all of this information, but no, I just want to see these states, and we ended up modeling 2 things, all the 3 state machine under the water level, and visualizing the states as a combination of those information. We work on a table and started looking, given the combination of what could happen on these 3 axes, what might be the state here. So we discovered a few things. We discovered that some combination were not supposed to be possible, and there was something that we needed to deal with. Maybe a couple of exceptions we were not thinking, but it was also giving us insights of, well, actually some states could be interesting for some scenario, like, yeah, the stealth mode, or having long-lasting training that could still accept registration after they are started. So interesting on one side, but also tricky on the other side. Like if we were following what the experts were saying, what they needed to see, they don't tell you, I just need to see this, leaving you the space for maneuver. They tell you it's like that. But that's a result. If following the expert in this area, I will couple everything to give you the state machine you want. This state machine looks like, oh, there's an aggregate moving in 3 different axes. So we can provide this as an illusion, but the thing is, how can we detect this? There's still this feeling of throwing rabbits out of the hat. Is there any way to detect that maybe the moving parts are not what the domain experts are telling us? And there are a few indicators. There are a few tricks that can help us detect some of the possibilities. The first one is what I call spice up your model. So we know a UML state diagram. We also know EventStorming, maybe. We know some other notation. Well, the thing becomes interesting if we start mixing them. I don't know how much you can get the color here, but actually you don't get the colors very well. But the thing which is interesting, like from confirm to running to past, the actor is time. Nobody makes a decision. It's just time is the only actor. So it's moving on the time coordinate. From unconfirmed to confirm or cancel, these are operations coming from the staff. So and so it feels like it changes for another reason. And while the registration are coming from external users and purchases, so it's a different, it's possibly a different axis. Is this guaranteed to be true? I don't know. Is it cheap and effective to just spend 1 minute adding colors to a diagram and see if it could give us some insight? Well, it's worth using a couple of extra colors and see if you can see something. And in general, it boils down to, if you just have one design option, and this is just capturing what the domain expert told you, that's not enough. So yeah, give yourself more than one option. And when it comes to the Whirlpool, add more layers. It's one of the great idea of the Whirlpool is understanding that every single perspective, every single view is just giving you a limited number of insights, combining them, adding layers, mixing them, it just helps. The second thing, and the reason why I was not lazy in showing you the picture of the state machine, the other thing is we found out that working lo-fi actually matters a lot. Well, you know my preference about lo-fi for an in-person workshop and so on, but even when working remotely, even when working solo, I find myself, if I'm starting to model on Miro, after a few minutes, I end up using my brain cycles to realign rectangles or squares and making sure that the arrows are not overlapping and doing some continuous cleanup. This is not design. While in order to get into the zone for solving the problem, I prefer staying lo-fi. I prefer paper, markers, and stickies, and space. Digital tools are twisting your approach to modeling in a way that you're not maybe completely conscious. I was not. I just saw it happening, and well, I will finalize the things on Miro, but I will explore on paper, and it just works better. Well, the other great tool is get yourself a green bar, especially when you see the possibility of a rabbit hole ahead of you. You would like to explore, that's great. You would like to maybe open a branch, maybe just make a copy so you don't even have to go back because there might be no way out of the rabbit hole. But yeah, get yourself a green bar because many times you might not be perfectly in the DDD zone or just making sure that all the changes are small. Little cherry on top. After combining all of this area, another thing started being really, really visible. That was how the different coding styles were fitting the different areas of a large-scale multi-bounded context approach. So for the draft model, event sourcing was not a good fit. clearly, I mean, you probably have experienced this, like, do I need to have an event for name changed? Does anybody care about name change or session added? When it's not ready, you're just adding stuff. You don't want to listen to all the changes to your Word document, maybe. So just give it a go. This is state-based, and maybe even with very loose consistency. That's the type of approach you might play with. And you might need an event when you complete the design, when you promote the design, when you decide to use a completed design as a template for a training. But when it's work in progress, well, the more traditional old-style approach works absolutely better. The other thing that I really like, and this is coming a little bit of a blast from the past in this area, is using Google-style specifications as warnings to help me with the completion of this training session. Design is okay, we have a trainer, we have a schedule, we have a media, we decided the duration, we defined the capacity, everything is okay, so it's ready for the prime time. This is where they actually help, and also made the play very well being composable, also for different policies before the execution. Yeah, also because we use the same specification here in the left side as warning and as blocker before going live. In the middle, the approach that we ended up liking was having multiple parallel event sourcing flows with coordination via policy. And all of the events were actually meaningful for the listener. The executable part is most of the time transactional. Everybody cares about the events. There might be consequences. They are important. And this is an absolutely good fit for event sourcing. And policies and sagas are or process manager to coordinate. For the tracking part, the thing that was interesting was we started as a pure read model. In a few scenarios, we realized that, oh, well, we probably need to have a little more because maybe the visualization logic, all of this illusion state was actually in the read model. And it started to be a little bit dumber, a little bit less dumb than just a read model. But it was not only a specific scenario. This is kind of a repeatable and pattern and approach that we started seeing over and over. The thing which is interesting is just many times if you are in love with the given approach, if you start exploring with even sourcing on the left, you're going to end up in horrible places. While if you play traditional in the executable part, well, you will find yourself coupling everything really, really quickly. But the idea of having moving part under the hood with a lot more independence, or even in naming the class, it was playing very well. But yes, in general, it just like pick the right tool for the job. So at the end, we were quite happy, especially because we saw how much the flexibility was giving us options at the business level. In general, the approach was keep exploring, postpone physical separation as long as you can, but make sure your team has enough discipline to support the separation. Water, please. So the thing that was worrying me was that this was not exactly modeling journey. It started as an idea to look into coding patterns and how they might still be useful and where the different style were important. But slide after slide and reflection after reflection, it started to look like the most important problem has to do with this one, is our way to approach the domain expert needs to be a little bit more sophisticated than this. This approach of following delete the information might actually be tricky. And I feel like, am I just destroying the whole idea of ubiquitous language here? Probably not, because when it comes to experts that just tell us how to patch the legacy, because patching is the dominant culture in the organization, there is this approach is leading us nowhere. The other approach is, well, in some areas, we shouldn't be passive. We might be the one working on the building blocks and eventually convincing after the fact, prototyping, showing different possibilities to the expert. Maybe the wasted time is just like convincing before the action, negotiating before naming a class, all of this type of thing. There might be a lot of Darwinian selection after the fact if you give yourself options. The thing which is relevant for me is nobody cares about design integrity except you. So design integrity is your business. You cannot outsource it to the domain expert. We have a lot of conversation. At the end, we handle the working model. And if we handle it, and all we can do is just like doing what we are told, well, we are fucked up. Sorry. I was looking for synonyms, but in this domain, I couldn't find anyone. And but the good news is, well, you can start clean. Now, the sad perception in me was every single company needs to start with a quick and dirty model. It will eventually become a larger monolith if you are successful, and this is when you start working on this. And I don't believe this narrative. I mean, this is a narrative which is driven by venture capitalists, or if you want to grow fast and so on, or maybe people that can make a good design, they are not working in the first days in the right company. So I don't believe that that's the only possibility. You can be quick without being dirty. Oh, really? Yes, it's just the two words have been used together so much time, but you can be maybe reasonably quick and still be reasonably clean. The other thing is, give yourself more alternatives. I mean, this is not a luxury, this is necessary, because your first choice is unsafe. It might be yourself falling into the account trap, or it might be still yourself falling into, I'm doing what the domain expert is telling me. You need an alternative. You need to be able to choose. That is vital, because I don't trust myself, I don't trust the expert, and the only thing that can deliver some good model is, at least I'm sure that the model I'm choosing is better than the alternative. Is it perfect? No, but it's at least the winner in my little brain competition. In terms of the visibility, what we can discuss, there was some concept that ended up interesting for the users, like the session plan, the ticket plan, and the whole session. These were visible. The session was something that wanted to be visible with the same level on both sides of the story. Not everything needs to be visible, like, oh, we're having this idea of session duration, which requires not a daytime, but just the time of the day, and they don't care about it. But the whole thing about having a public event separated from the ticket sale in the open event, okay, that was our magic trick, is behind the scenes. We are not discussing it with them. And so not everything needs to be discussed in the same way. We will be discussing the important thing, UI, read models. We need to know the dynamics of the policies, because this is the current agreement around the business. But aggregates and the actual command names under the hood, they might be our thing. Getting close. Business composability is business confidence. That is the thing that is kind of showing that we're going in the right way. Still, this sentence expressed in this way is still scary, because I would like to make sure that this business composability is coming from code and not from a PowerPoint of some big consulting company. Or you just combine the two things together. Our business is just like Lego in the PowerPoint, and then integration cost. So to me, the important thing is when the business composability is the result of model confidence. I play with the building blocks. I built the building blocks. They are working together. They are still giving you the green bar, and they are giving you options to experiment without a business opportunity, without seeing your whole model falling apart. That is more or less where I like to be. I guess that's the last one from me. A couple of references if you want, but yeah, I'm done. I'm not in a hurry, so if you have a question, I can stay. But I also know that we are. Well, I did exactly 1 hour, but up to you. Anyway, I'm done. Thank you.